Okay, here we go. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. This is kind of a weird one to talk about. It's a delicate topic. Some people love it, some people hate it. It's a very divisive movie. I love it, but I also have a lot of issues with it. It has a number of problems, not the least of which is that it's considered to be, at best, racially insensitive, as well as a little sexist. And it's pretty hard to argue against that, and I'm not even going to try. It was banned from filming in India, and it was banned from even being released in India, at least initially. And it's easy to see why. India and the Hindu religion are not exactly depicted in the best light. And Indiana Jones movies all have historical inaccuracies, but this is probably the least accurate movie in the series. But despite that, I still think it's a really fun movie. And I'm not going to try to justify certain things, but I'll hopefully be able to explain why there are good things about the movie too. And poke a little fun at it along the way. Because as I said, it's ultimately a very fun movie in my opinion. The worst part for me is probably the depiction of Willie Scott. We all know how annoying she is. She's constantly screaming. It really becomes grating. And she serves basically no useful function in the movie. This is not Marion Ravenwood. This is also a much darker movie than Raiders. It's a borderline horror movie, really. And it might even be the movie that kind of opened the door to horror for me when I was a kid. It's hard to trace it back to one specific thing, but I mean, this movie is fucking grim at times. And it's a fine line to walk. It's hard to make a movie that's fun and dark. But I think they succeeded for the most part. And I'm going to talk about all that and more as I go along. And there's going to be some gross images in this. So, I mean, you should have watched the movie before seeing this video. But I'm just warning you in case it's been a while. I know it's weird to warn you about gross images when the last movie I talked about had melting Nazis. But I guess that's how I decided to play it. Anyway, let's just get into it. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom from 1984, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Harrison Ford, Kate Capshaw, and Ke Huy Quan. The movie opens up in Shanghai, China in 1935. So this is a year before the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And we instantly get introduced to Willie Scott, who is singing in a nightclub cleverly named Club Obi-Wan. Nice reference. And Willie is apparently a famous American singer, which never made much sense to me. How famous is she? Because she's singing in a glorified bar in Shanghai. This is like if you went to eat at a fancy restaurant in, I don't know, Venice, Italy. You sit down, you order the veal franchise or whatever the fuck, and all of a sudden Adele shows up on stage. And she says, "Hello, it's me," or whatever the fuck she likes to say. I mean, that'd be absolute madness, wouldn't it? They say Willie Scott is a famous singer. But I think she might be small-time famous. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, Indiana Jones is introduced, and he's doing the best impersonation of his dad. I mean, that's clearly got to be an homage to Sean Connery in Goldfinger, right? But I got to say, I'm not a fashionista by any means, but the tuxedo, specifically with the white dinner jacket, is a sharp look. I don't care who you are, you can't look bad in this getup. Anyway, he's meeting a gangster named Lao She, and Indy apparently arranged to have a trade with him. He gets some sort of fancy diamond, and Lao gets the remains of Nurhaci, the first emperor of Manchu dynasty. And it's a little bit awkward, because the night before, Lao's son tried to take the Nurhaci urn from Indy by force. And apparently, Indy cut off one of his fucking fingers over it. I mean, Jesus, this movie is already darker than Raiders. And Willie Scott joins them. And the dude with only 9 phalanges pulls a gun on Indy. And they demand to see Nurhaci. Indy grabs Willie and threatens her with a fucking barbecue fork. It's a bit of a renegade move, taking a hostage. And it's kind of ridiculous for Indy to assume that Lao or any of his men will care if Willie lives or dies. I know I certainly don't. But they do relent. It seems like they're going to stick to the original deal. Indy gets the diamond, Lao gets Nurhaci. And it's nice that they have this little lazy Susan in the middle of the fucking table. It's really convenient. I don't think I've ever seen one in a restaurant before, but they have one here. And Indiana Jones stupidly takes a drink from his drink. And it's kind of insane that he does this because the drink was on the Lazy Susan too. So it was literally given to him by Lau's son. And of course now Lau asks for the diamond back in exchange for the antidote to the poison he just drank. But Indy's friend Wuhan shows up, posing as a waiter. He pulls a gun on them. And Willie says that's not a waiter. I mean, he could be a waiter. He's just a waiter with a gun. Whatever. Willie is very astute. And some random champagne bottles pop. Wuhan gets shot. Really inconvenient that the whole place started acting like it's New Year's Eve or some shit. So with his friend dead and his back against the wall, Indy is not fucking around anymore. He takes a shish kebab and hurls it like a fucking javelin at the guy who shot his friend. And then Indy yells in Lau's face in Chinese. Indy cursing at his enemies in their native language will kind of be a bit of a theme in this movie. And the antidote goes flying, and it's a mad scramble for it. A fight breaks out. There's chaos in this club right now, and it might have something to do with the guy who just got impaled by a skewer full of roast beef. That would be my guess. And then Indy punches a fucking cigarette lady. What is happening right now? I mean, to be fair, he did just get punched himself. So maybe he's a little dazed. And I don't know what she's doing selling cigarettes. Everyone else is running for the exits. She's literally not reading the room. But why did he punch the shit out of her? What a disaster. Fucking cigarettes go flying everywhere. It's a mess. And the cigarette girl isn't the only one who has zero awareness because the fucking dancers are still dancing and the music is still playing. Balloons are falling from the ceiling. It's a fucking Looney Tunes. And Willie finds the antidote and she sticks it in her tit for safekeeping. And Indy avoids some gunfire by hiding behind a huge gong and following it as it rolls towards a window. He grabs a hold of Willie on the way, and they both go flying out of the window. And this club is apparently on the top floor of a 4-story building or some shit. They hit some awnings and break their fall, miraculously, and they end up in the back of a car being driven by a child named Short Round.
Wow, holy smoke! Crash landing!
Short Round, step on it!
Okie dokie, Dr. Jones, hold on to your potatoes!
Crying out loud, there's a kid driving the car!
And Indy goes right for Willie's tit to get the antidote. And I'm of two minds on that. Inappropriate? Yes. But then again, he's literally dying. He gets it and drinks it down. I don't know why Lau gave him a real antidote. Could have just made it blue Gatorade and his plan would have been the same. But whatever. There's a chase and some gunplay, and really for no reason at all, Indy asks Willie to hold his gun, and she drops it out of a fucking window. Doesn't make much sense. She's useless. They make it to an airport and meet Dan Aykroyd for some reason. They get on a plane full of live poultry, and Indy notices Lao She and decides to gloat.
Nice try, Lao She!
Well, that's embarrassing. And I have no earthly idea why Willie Scott is going with them. Makes absolutely no sense. Lau wasn't even after her. I mean, maybe she'd be in trouble for giving him the antidote, but in all the chaos, did they actually even see her pick it up? I don't know. Either way, she's going. And Indy changes into his Indy costume, and they fall asleep on this chicken coop. Which is really inconvenient, because the pilots, who obviously work for Lau, are going to take that opportunity to dump the fuel and bail out of the plane. Eventually they wake up and discover that the pilots are gone. And Indy doesn't know how to fly yet.
You know how to fly, don't you?
No, do you?
Oh, no.
I mean, we know he eventually learns how to fly, but it remains to be seen if he ever learned how to land. And there's no parachutes on board, so Indy comes up with the bright idea to use an inflatable life raft, and Willie, in her horrendous, annoying way, says, "We're not sinking, we're crashing." Props to her, though. She's right. A rare salient point from Willie Scott. So they jump out of the plane, and inflate the raft on the way down. Somehow they end up inside of it. That seems like a small miracle on its own. The plane crashes. Rest in peace to those poor chickens. And they survive the fall. Not only the fall from the plane, but they also go flying off a mountaintop too. I mean, it's madness. They're in a fucking boat right now. I think Temple of Doom is a vastly superior movie to The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But even I can't say much to defend this. I don't think it's quite as bad as Nuking in the Fridge, but it's up there. But we'll get to that when we get to that. And they end up in India, and they meet this guy who is some sort of village shaman. He takes them to the village, and Indy asks if they could have a guide to Delhi. But that's not in the cards. The shaman explains that a Thuggee cult from Pankot Palace came to their village and took their sacred stone known as a Shiva Lingam. And since it's been gone, their crops have died and their wells have dried up. They also find out that they stole all the children of the village. Like I said, it's pretty dark. And they want Indy to get the stone and the children back, although they do seem way more concerned about the stone. They also believe that Indy is their savior. And that's another issue that some people have with this movie. It's a white savior situation. I mean, it's almost a white messiah situation. They look at Indy like he's an avenging angel sent by Shiva. And spoiler alert, he kind of turns out to be that. But whatever. Indy thinks the missing Shiva Lingam is actually one of the 5 Sankara stones, which were supposedly given to humanity by God to help fight evil. And if Indy was on the fence about helping before, he's not anymore. Because if this is a Sankara stone, it means fortune and glory.
What is Sankara?
Fortune and glory, kid. Fortune and glory.
So the next day, they set off on some elephants, and I still have no idea why Indy is coming along. They asked Indiana Jones to go to Pankot, and he agreed. Short Round is coming along because he's Indy's sidekick and he goes where Indy goes. Why is Willie going? I mean, there's absolutely no reason why they can't just send her on her way to Delhi. I mean, she's in heels for fuck's sake. And she mistakes some bats for birds. Indy says they're giant vampire bats, which, I don't think there's any such thing as giant vampire bats. Vampire bats are pretty small, heinous-looking creatures. And I don't think they're found in India at all. What they actually are is a bunch of fruit bats, which are like these big, mousy-looking boys. So there you go. I'm like the Long Island David Attenborough or some shit. Anyway, they camp for the night, and we get a little backstory on Shorty. His family died when the Japanese bombed Shanghai, and he's been living on the streets since he was 4. Indy caught him trying to pick his pocket. And I guess he's been kind of his sidekick ever since then. At least while he's in Shanghai. It's almost like when Batman caught Jason Todd stealing the tires off the Batmobile. And Willie continues to be a tax on everyone's ears. There's a whole scene where she's just screaming at jungle wildlife. She screams at a fucking owl. An owl. Don't get me wrong. I have anxiety too, and I would not like sleeping in the jungle myself. But I like to think I'm capable of being a little quiet about it. Fucking get a hold of yourself. And Indy gives a little bit more backstory on the Sankara stones. Sankara was apparently a guy who climbed a mountain and met Shiva. And Shiva gave Sankara 5 sacred stones with magical properties to combat evil. I don't think any of that is based on anything real. I don't think it's based on any religion. I think it's all made up. As far as I know. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it sounds suspiciously like Moses climbing Mount Sinai and receiving the 10 Commandments from God. Anyway, Indy gets scared by a snake. It's not truly an Indiana Jones movie unless that happens. And they finally make it to Pankot Palace the next day. They meet some guy named Chatter Lal, the prime minister to the Maharaja of Pankot. The Maharaja is like a king or a prince of some sort. And he invites them all in. They give them rooms. Everything seems on the up and up. No evil cult in sight. But then we get the famous dinner scene, or infamous dinner scene. In the first course, snake surprise.
What's the surprise?
Excellent question, Willie. I'm glad you asked that. The surprise is more snakes. It's a Russian nesting doll of snakes. And I'm a little surprised that Indy has no reaction to this, although I think they are technically eels. But they're supposed to be snakes. Either way, it's horrendous. And this is one of the main reasons why the movie is kind of a problem. They don't eat this stuff in India. In fact, I could be wrong, but for religious reasons, I think most of the people are actually vegetarian. Or at least in the Hindu religion, they're vegetarian, as far as I know. But I am fairly ignorant, so forgive me. Anyway, the next course is beetle buttholes, followed by eyeball soup. And the eyeballs look pretty human and uncooked. Is it possible that they are just fucking with them? I mean, it is a cult we're dealing with here. Maybe they're just messing with the outsiders. And then finally, they serve chilled monkey brains, which looks more like chilled ape brains. Right out of the ape head. I mean, what are we doing here, Stephen? What are we doing here? Can you even eat the brains of an ape? I don't think you can. And if you can, it's got to be highly inadvisable. But at least they're chilled. I guess that's nice. And it's at this point, I would just call the waiter over and ask if you've got a menu. Can I hear the specials? Do you have any pasta? Some penne alla vodka or some chicken maybe? I'll take a salad. Have you got any green leaves? No? Okay. I guess I'm eating monkey brains then. And while all this is going on, Indy is asking questions. He says the villagers he met told him that an ancient evil has returned to Pankot Palace, and that they said the Thuggee stole their sacred rock. And this chatter guy denies the existence of the Thuggee and even the stone itself. It's pretty suspicious. And later, Indy brings some fruit to Willie. And this is absolutely cringe dialogue. I mean, it's just, it almost makes your skin crawl because it's supposed to be funny, but it's not really funny. It's just really, really cringe.
It can be hard to handle,
I've had worse.
but you'll never have better.
I don't know. As a scientist, I don't want to prejudice my experiment. I'll let you know in the morning.
Why, you conceited ape.
And that's not even really the worst of it. Both of these people are assholes right now. And Indy storms off, arrogantly thinking it won't be long before Willie's horniness forces her to follow him. And he gets attacked by an assassin who was waiting in his room. And Indy kills his ass with a ceiling fan, as you do. And he runs into Willie's room searching for another assassin. He doesn't find one, but he does find a secret passage hidden behind a statue's big fat tits. And he and Shorty go exploring. They find bugs, a lot of bugs, an insane amount of bugs. All different species. I mean, this is a bug orgy right now. It's mental. And I just hope the praying mantis wasn't invited, because that would be a disaster. It never ends well. They make their way to a small room, and Short Round accidentally triggers a trap that seals them inside and causes the ceiling to close in on them. And they call for Willie. She heads down the passage, slow as shit, screaming every step of the way because of the bugs. And Indy explains the situation to her.
We are going to die!
She manages to get it together and pull the release to free them. But she hits the same switch that Short Round hit, and the walls are closing in again. They barely make it out. And the three of them make their way to a massive cavern, and they stumble upon a Thuggee ceremony. They're worshipping Kali. And more than an hour into the movie, the main villain, Molaram, is introduced. And they put some guy in a small cage, suspended from a chain. He's wearing a Hawaiian lei, but I don't think he's going on vacation. Molaram rips his fucking heart out, and the dude is still alive. And his heart is still beating. They lower him into a pit of lava, and he bursts into flames, and so does his estranged heart. Wow, what a show. What a party. That is well worth the price of admission. Do they do this every Saturday? Because I don't know about you, but I'm coming back. They bring the cage up, and it's totally empty. The dude was completely melted away. And I don't know what the cage is made out of, but it seems to be fine. I guess it's adamantium. And the Sankara stone is revealed, along with 2 others. So they have 3 of the 5. They placed them in a giant skull. I'm guessing that's not a real skull, because it looks like the dead Ant-Man from Old Man Logan. And the stones glow when they're close together because there's diamonds inside them. I don't know why. It's best not to wonder about the minutiae of this movie. And the ceremony concludes. Can't really top the heart-ripping lava trick. That had to be the main event. And when all the cult members file out, Indy climbs down and grabs the stone. But before that, he does his best Gowron impression.
You could get killed chasing after your damn fortune and glory.
Maybe. But not today.
Perhaps. But not today.
Yikes. And look at how horny Willie is. She is either terrified or horny. Those are her 2 main emotions, and I can totally relate. Anyway, Indy grabs the stones, and he's about to head back to Willie and Shorty, but he hears some screaming, and it's not Willie screaming. So he goes to investigate, and he discovers that there's a giant mine, and all the children from the village are being used as slave labor. They're being whipped and beaten. As I said, this movie's pretty dark. And Indy can't stand the sight of it, and who could blame him? So he grabs a rock and throws it at this big motherfucker, who also happens to be the same big motherfucker from Raiders. I guess they just give him a call when they need a big motherfucker. And this time they just put him in brownface and slapped a big fucking Rasputin beard on him. I mean, okay. So throwing the rock gave away his position, so Indy gets caught. And they throw him in a cage with a bunch of kids and Shorty, who also got pinched, along with Willie. And the kids tell them that they'll be forced to drink the blood of Kali, and they will fall into the black sleep of the Kali Ma. Basically, they're going to end up being brainwashed zombies. And this kid, who looks like a young Kate Micucci, explains.
We become like them. We'll be alive, but like a nightmare. You drink blood, you not wake up from nightmare.
This is very scary stuff. So let's do the rundown. We got magic rocks being used for evil, magic blood being used to brainwash people, enslaved children, and disembodied hearts bursting into flames.
Whoa, this is heavy.
Yes, it is, Marty. Yes, it is. Just be glad you're in a franchise where the only thing you got to worry about is how horny your mom is. And Indy meets Molaram for the first time, and he explains that the last 2 stones are hidden somewhere in the catacombs, and that's what the kids are digging for. He says soon they will have all 5, and the Thuggies will be all powerful. Molaram is basically a low-rent Thanos. And they hold Indy down and give him the Jesus juice, or I guess it's the Kali juice, but not before the Maharaja shows up and takes out this cute little Indy voodoo doll. I mean, now we're just mixing and matching cultural mythologies, aren't we? We basically have the Hindu equivalent of an offshoot cult using an element from an African religion. I mean, is this what's happening here? I guess so. Either way, don't blame me. And he uses the doll to burn Indy. It burns him, but it doesn't cause any physical damage. Then they start whipping Indy and Short Round, which does cause physical damage. It's fucking grim. And after all that, they finally give Indy the Kali juice, and he's brainwashed. They stick Short Round in the mines, and for some reason they stick Willie in the cage, and they're going to drop her in the lava, just like that poor bastard from earlier. Indy himself straps her in. They don't rip out her heart, though, which is convenient. It'd be tough to put that back in. And Indy lowers her into the pit. But luckily, Short Round has escaped from the mines. While everyone else was mining for stones, he was mining his own chains. And he crashes the party. He burns Indy with a torch, and this snaps him out of it. He's back to normal, and he and Short Round fight their way through the cultists. And they rescue Willie just before she hits the lava, although the dude from earlier burst into flames long before he hit the lava. Maybe Willie is more flame resistant than the average person. Or she just has plot armor. Who's to say? In any case, they reunite, and Indy completes his character arc for the movie.
Now let's get out of here.
Right. All of us.
So there you go. Fortune and glory doesn't matter anymore. He's going to bring the stones back to the village and rescue every one of these kids and save the day. Good stuff. He beats up the bad guys, frees the kids, they go tearing ass out of there. I mean, do they know the way home from here? It's pretty far from the village, and they're malnourished. I guess they're just going to wait outside for Indy, which is probably a good idea. But the big motherfucker shows up, and he kills some rando with a sledgehammer. That dude is 100% dead. Tragic. And then Indy gets his lungs punched out. I mean, Jesus. And I like that Willie is holding Short Round back. It's probably a good idea to protect him from the brick shithouse that basically hurts kids for a living. And if he can't break free from Willie, he probably can't take on this big dude, so it's good she's holding him back. And Indy continues fighting this dude. They end up on a giant conveyor belt headed towards a massive rock steamroller. And the Maharaja shows up and starts stabbing the little Indiana Jones doll, which complicates things. Indy has to fight this big motherfucker off while dealing with magic stab wounds in his back. It's a problem. Luckily, Short Round sees what's going on, and he makes his way up to the Maharaja and gives him a royal ass whooping. And Indy and Short Round are just laying into both of these motherfuckers. It is a beating. The big motherfucker gets steamrolled and turns into a skid mark, and Short Round burns the Maharaja. He was brainwashed just like all the rest. And he tells Shorty how to get out of the mines using the left tunnel. They all jump in a minecart, and of course, Indy takes the wrong tunnel. I mean, it's painfully obvious which way they should have gone. You can see daylight through the left tunnel, but the right tunnel looks like it leads to the seventh circle of hell. And there's a minecart chase. It's pretty ridiculous. Mola Ram orders his men to drop a giant pitcher of water to flood the tunnels, and it is literally a giant pitcher. It has like a little lip and everything. It's kind of an extreme reaction, too. I mean, especially since they're going the wrong way. Just go catch them. Jesus. And then they play tug of war with poor Short Round as the rope, and he gets all stretchy. I mean, what is this kid? Is he Reed Richards? Why is he so stretchy? I don't know. They finally get him back in the cart, and they come to a stop. They get out, and the water catches up to them. But it's okay, because they take a right turn. And we all know that water can't take right turns. It's a well-known scientific fact. And they make their way towards daylight, but they get separated, and Shorty and Willie make their way to a bridge, the Strong Bridge, with Florida alligators beneath it. That's right, there are Florida alligators in India. We just have to live with that. Indy gets delayed by some dudes. Nice callback to Raiders of the Lost Ark. And Mola Ram shows up on the other end of the bridge just waiting for Willie and Short Round. And Willie screams, of course, but I have no idea how they didn't see Mola Ram on their approach. I mean, look at this. Maybe Willie's eyes were closed, but Short Round is looking straight ahead. And he looks back at the last second, and he doesn't even turn around when Willie starts screaming. I guess because she's always screaming, so he probably thinks it's no big deal. Anyway, they have Indy trapped on the bridge, and he decides to cut the bridge ropes. And even if they could hold on, which I think is debatable, they hit the side of this rock face with such force that I think every single one of them would be smashed. But whatever. Maybe the stones protected them. And there was a fight. As they climb up to the top, Mola Ram tries to rip Indy's heart out, but Indy punches him with his own fist, as you do. I don't know why Mola Ram even made a fist if he was about to get punched with his own hand, but he did. And Indy starts yelling at him in Hindi. The fanny pack starts flaming. 2 of the stones fall out. Mola Ram tries to catch the last one, but it burns him, and he tosses it like a hot potato, and Indy is able to catch it, unharmed by the heat, because he's the good guy. And then the Maharaja shows up with the Indian army, and they take care of the remaining cultists. Indy climbs up the ladder which was once a bridge, and it's a success. They make their way back to the village with the stone and the children. And the ratio of kids to villagers is kind of insane. It looks like every villager had about 10 kids. In any case, Indy gives the stone back to the shaman, forfeiting his fortune and glory, and then he makes out with Willie. The end. Overall, I think it's a very solid Indiana Jones adventure. It might be Indy's most heroic movie. He saves the day in all of his movies, but in this one you can see the faces of all the people he saves. And unfortunately, Willie is mostly pretty useless and very annoying. I think it's a shame she's written that way. I wish she could have had a reason to be there. Like maybe instead of a singer, she's a competing archaeologist or something. That way she could still butt heads with Indiana Jones, and they would have a mutual interest. And she'd have a reason to be there. And unfortunately, her romance with Indy is totally unbelievable. I believe that there's a physical attraction between them, but nothing more than that. I think if Willie died in this movie, Indy would be bummed out for a minute, but he'd move on pretty quickly. She's not Marion. And I think one of the highlights is Short Round. He's great. I know some people find him annoying too, but to me, he was one of the best parts. And it's a shame they felt the need to give Indy a biological son later on when he had a much better son in this movie. I bet they regret not bringing him back. I mean, especially since the actor is like a big star now. I never gave a shit about the Oscars, but it's kind of funny that Short Round now has as many Oscar nominations as Harrison Ford. In any case, I still enjoy the movie. It's obviously not nearly as good as Raiders or The Last Crusade. I mean, it has a lot of problems. It's obviously not an accurate representation of India or the Hindu religion. The Thuggees were supposedly a real thing, but they were just kind of a group of thieves and murderers, and they weren't really linked to any kind of religion. Pretty much the only accurate things in the movie are that the Thuggees existed and that there are stones called Shiva Lingams, but that's about it. But anyway, that's just about all I got for now. Let me know what you thought of this movie. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you find it offensive? Let me know. You'll get no judgment from me on any of those fronts. And we're halfway through the Indiana Jones movies now. The next one will be The Last Crusade, obviously. So keep an eye out for that one. And until next time, take it easy.